Goblin launch detected.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game has Mika, Pat, Maximus, and myself battling it out. Mika is playing his Naya Rith deck, keeping Krenko Tin Street Kingpin, Kadama's Reach, Windscarred Crag, Galtan Maverin, Weathered Wayfarer, a Plains, and a Forest. Pat is also rocking a dragon, with Korvold keeping Birds of Paradise, Forest, Scoot Swarm, 3 Visits, Road to Return, a Swamp, and Gemstone Mine. I am playing my Jodah Backgrounds deck, keeping Steadison Champion, Relic of Legends, Guild Artisan, Forest, Fabro Elder, Swan Song, and Wooded Foothills. Last but not least, Max is playing a commander that's on a dragon with Sivitri, keeping Machine God's Effigy, Unwinding Clock, Gold Vein Pick, Cloud Key, Swamp, Island, and a Tainted Isle. I win the die roll and start us off. I draw and play a Wooded Foothills. Max just plays a Swamp. Mika's got a Plains for turn and taps it for a Weathered Wayfarer. Pat plays a Forest and then casts Birds of Paradise. As he passes turn, I sacrifice the Wooded Foothills for a Breeding Pool. I draw and play a Forest. I then cast Sword Coast Sailor, passing to Max. Max has a Tainted Isle, and he casts Gold Vein Pick, passing to Mika. Mika just plays a Windscarred Crag, which comes in tapped but gains him 1 life. Pat draws and plays a Gemstone Mine, adding 3 counters to the mine. He then removes 1 to help cast 3 Visits and passes. I draw, but sadly without a 3rd land, have to pass. Max plays an Island and then plays out Emery. This lets him mill 4 cards, and he then equips her with a pick. After that, Max passes, and during his end step, Mika activates the Weathered Wayfarer, going to find a command tower. Mika draws and plays a command tower he just tutored for. He then casts Krenko Tin Street Kingpin, passing. Pat draws and plays a mountain. He casts Korvold, and as it comes in, sacrifices the Birds of Paradise, drawing a card and putting a +1/+1 counter onto his commander. He passes after that. I draw, but miss a land drop yet again, and I have to move to discard and then pass. Max draws and plays an Island. He plays Cloud Key, naming Artifact, and then activates Emery, choosing the Assyrian Sculptor, and casts it from his graveyard. His artifacts now cost 2 colorless less, and he passes to Mika. Mika draws and plays a Forest. Going to combat, he swings Krenko at Max and makes 2 Goblin tokens. Max then takes the hit, and Mika then follows up with a Kadama's Reach, looking for some lands as he passes turn. Pat draws and removes his last counter from Gemstone Mine, and has to sacrifice the mine, getting to draw a card from Korvold and adding another +1/+1 counter to his commander, to help cast Scoot Swarm. He then plays a Swamp for turn, making an insect token from the Scoot Swarm trigger, and then moves to combat. Pat swings Korvold at Max, sacrificing an insect from the on attack trigger, drawing a card, and adding a +1/+1 counter to the dragon. Max then takes the hit for 7, and Pat passes after that. I draw my 3rd land on turn 5, playing a Woodland Cemetery. I then tap enough to cast Relic of Legends, and pass to Max. Max has a Tomb of the Spirit Dragon for turn, and then plays a Vidalcan Archmage. He then activates Emery to cast Prime Blade from his graveyard, and gets to draw a card from the Archmage. He then moves the Gold Vein Pick to the Ethereum Sculptor, and moves to combat. Max swings the Sculptor at me for 2, which I take, and he gets to make a treasure token, and after that, Max passes. Mika draws and plays Doubling Season. He then plays a Windswept Heath. Mika announces he'll move to combat, which gives Pat a round of priority before leaving the main phase, and he casts a Force of Vigor, exiling a card from his hand, to destroy the Ethereum Sculptor and Doubling Season. Mika then swings Krenko at Pat. This has Pat taking 3, and Mika also making 3 more Goblin tokens. With nothing else, Mika passes. Pat draws and plays a Sakura Tribe Elder, and then sacrifices it to draw a card off of Korvold and add another +1/+1 counter to his commander, and then go and find a swamp. Pat also gets to make an insect token off the Scoot Swarm seeing the swamp come in. Pat then plays his land for turn, a command beacon, and this time gets to make a Scoot Swarm copy. Going to combat, Pat then swings Korvold at max again, and sacrifices the insect token, drawing a card and adding another counter to his commander. Max then takes 9 more commander damage, and Pat passes to me. I draw but can't seem to find any of my lands or ramp spells, so I have to cast a Fabro Elder. With nothing else to do, I have to pass. Max draws, and before moving to the main phase, Mika sacrifices the Windswept Heath to find Stomping Ground. Max then plays a Mistvault Bridge, and once more activates Emery, recasting the Ethereum Sculptor. He also gets to draw a card from the Archmage. He then equips both the Prying Blade and the Goldmane Pick to the Sculptor. He swings it at me and gets to make 2 treasures as it connects. Mika draws and plays a Mountain. He then plays Galta and Maverin and moves to combat. He swings Krenko at max and 5 Goblin tokens at Pat, making 4 more Goblin tokens from Krenko, and then 6 Vampire tokens from Galta and Maverin's trigger. Neither Pat nor Max block, and they both take their hits, and with nothing else, Mika passes. Pat draws and plays a Forest, making 2 more Scoot Swarm tokens. He then plays a Swiftfoot Boots and puts them onto Korvold. Going to combat, Pat swings Korvold at Mika, sacrificing a Scoot Swarm token, drawing a card, and adding another +1/+1 counter to his commander, and Mika then takes the hit. After that, Pat then plays an Elvish Reclaimer, passing to me. I draw and play an Isolated Chapel. I play out a Stetson Champion, and then follow up with a Guild Artisan, drawing a card from the champion and adding a +1/+1 counter to it as it comes into play. With nothing else, I pass. Max draws, and he casts a Machine God's Effigy, having it come in as a copy of Korvold, and as it does, sacrifices a treasure to the Korvold trigger. This lets him put a +1/+1 counter onto the artifact which isn't actually a creature, and draws a card. He then plays an Unwinding Clock, and once that's done, follows up with a Kappa Cannoneer. Max then plays a Darksteel Citadel, and moves the Goldmane Pick onto the Cannoneer, and passes to Mika. Mika plays a Forest and announces he'll move to combat. And before letting him, Max casts Machine Over Matter on Galta and Maverin. Mika then decides to swing the team all out at Max, and makes 5 more Goblin tokens thanks to Krenko's trigger. Max blocks 4 Vampire tokens and takes the rest, dropping to 2, and Mika gains some life thanks to the vampires having lifelink. After combat, Mika plays Elspeth, Sun's Champion, and then downticks her to try to wipe the board from all the big creatures. Pat responds by casting Golgari Charm and regenerates Korvold, and with nothing else, Mika passes. Pat draws and sacrifices the command beacon to the Elvish Reclaimer, going to find a Terramorphic Expanse to put into play tapped. This allows him to draw a card and put another counter onto his commander. Not to mention, making a bunch more Scoot Swarms. Pat then moves to combat, swinging Korvold at Mika, which has Korvold triggering, and sacrificing one of the newly made Scoot Swarm tokens, which in turn draws Pat another card and gives Korvold another counter. Mika then takes the hit, and after combat, Pat casts a Tunneling Geopede, which Max decides to counter with a Spell Swindle, making 3 treasures. With nothing else, Pat passes. I draw and play a Soul Ring, and then cast Eidolon of Blossoms, drawing from the trigger of its own as it enters, plus the Stetson Champion. I follow up with an Arid Mesa, and pass. And during my end step, Max decides to sacrifice the 3 treasure tokens to his Machine God Effigy's Korvold, drawing 3 cards. Max then moves to his turn, and draws. He plays a treasure map for free thanks to all of his discounters, and then casts Sivitri. He then upticks her to de-incentivize anyone attacking him, and after that, passes. Mika draws and plays a Plains. He then replays Galta and Maverin, and Max responds by casting Access Denied. I then respond by cracking my Arid Mesa for Hollowed Fountain, taking an extra 2 so it comes in untapped, and then cast Mana Drain on Galta and Maverin because I need the mana. My counter resolves first, which means that Max's Access Denied will fizzle, and once all that's done, Mika then upticks Elspeth to make 3 soldier tokens, and then moves to combat. He swings 3 vampires at me, and I block 2 of them and take 1, while Mika gains 3 life. In his post-combat main phase, Mika then plays Sakura Tribe Elder and passes. During his end step, Max activates Treasure Map to scry 1. Pat draws and plays Road of Return to get back the Tunneling Geopede. Max responds by scrying 1 again by activating the treasure map and bottoming it. Pat then recasts the Geopede, which comes into play, and he sacrifices the Terramorphic Expanse. This triggers Korvold, drawing him a card and getting another +1/+1 counter to it. The land then comes in, triggering the Scoot Swarm to make a bunch more tokens, and the Geopede deals 1 to each of Pat's opponents. Pat then plays a Dragonskull Summit as his land for turn, which deals 1 to all of his opponents, and has the added benefit of killing Max, not to mention adding even more Scoot Swarms to his already huge army. Going to combat, Korvold goes at Mika, and all the Scoot Swarms go at me. I block 2 of them, but take the rest, and Mika gets taken out. After that, Pat passes turn. I draw and gain 7 colorless mana from my mana drain in my main phase, and then play a Reflecting Pool. I then use some of it to cast Sunbird's Invocation, and once that's out, cast Mirari's Wake. I reveal my top 5, getting to keep Zur Eternal Skeener, which is not what I wanted, and I was hoping for a board wipe. I unfortunately have nothing else to do, and I pass my turn. During my end step, Pat activates the Elvish Reclaimer to sacrifice a land, and goes to find another one, and then casts Crop Rotation to try and find another land, but I stop it with a Swan Song. He gets to draw a card and add another counter to Korvold at least, and then goes to find 1 more land, doubling his Scoot Swarms to 74. Plus, getting to deal 1 to me because of the Geopede. We then move to Pat's turn, and he draws and plays Cultivate, getting to double his Scoot Swarms again as he puts a land into play tapped, plus pings me for 1 with the Geopede. He then plays the land that he put to hand, doubling them again and dealing 1 more. Going to combat, Pat decides to commit everything just in case, and I get thoroughly taken out, and Pat wins the game. Game review time. This game was 59 minutes and 2 seconds, and yeah, it was pretty sweet. Considering the fact that I didn't really get to do a whole heck of a lot, I enjoyed seeing all the other dragon decks in action. For whatever reason, my opening hand I thought was pretty good. I had 2 lands and a decent amount of 3-drops. All I had to do was draw a 3rd land, which, didn't happen before turn 5. Once I did, things went really well with that Feywild Elder, until Mika pumped the brakes on it with Elspeth, which was pretty much I think one of the few actual casualties of Elspeth being downticked. Korvold is a great Jund Dragon Commander, probably the 2nd best in the colors after Prosh, which I say entirely aware that I'm just doing it to farm engagement. And I think Pat's deck was really fun to see, although I will say that the MVP for his deck was that Unhindered Scoot Swarm. My goodness did that get out of control fast. Similarly, Mika also had an all-star token maker with Krenko, and I'm kinda glad that Doubling Season got taken out, otherwise we would have been overwhelmed with Goblin tokens. It's a shame for Max that Pat was able to go and find that Tunneling Geopede, because Sivitri's uptick ability was a perfect answer to 2 of his opponents. Sure, my deck wouldn't have had too much of an issue since I typically only swing with Jodah, but let's face it, I wasn't really in this game. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.